multiple piercings at the same time, as in one sitting. You know, things like getting both your ears pierced, Constellation Piercings, getting both your nipples done, maybe getting some stacked piercings or multiple nose piercings or multiple eyebrows, all kinds, or bites, you know, those groupings. We're also going to talk a little bit about what you should know beforehand or consider beforehand, the piercing experience, kind of what that's like, what healing's going to be like, living with them, and what happens if you decide you don't want them anymore. Coming up next on Pros and Cons by a Piercer. Season 2, episode number 32, so you might want to just stick around. For those who are new to the channel, first off, welcome to the channel. Hope you're enjoying it, but this might be the first video you've watched, and you may not know who I am. My name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and operate the Axiom Body Piercing Studio, located right here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside the Skin Kitchen Tattoo. So, when I talk to you about these things, I'm talking about a level of expertise that comes from being in the body piercing industry for well over 27 years. So what I'm going to talk about today is a pretty common question I get. I get asked, you know, how many piercings can I do in one sitting? Should I do multiple piercings? Should I do both of the piercings at once? What do I need to think about? What should I consider, etc.? So we're going to go through some pros and cons. It's going to be 5 of each. We're also going to talk a little bit about some other stuff. When it comes to this style or multiple piercings, usually what we're talking about is things like earlobes. Constellation piercings was usually multiple piercings in the upper ear area. Jacob's ladder, of course. Stacked piercings where you're doing multiple piercings on top of each other. And then the symmetry piercings like snake bites and the 8 billion different named bites in both nostrils and both eyebrows or both nipples or what have you. You know, where you have 2 of something. These are really common piercings, are really common groupings, and it's a pretty common question that I get asked. So let's get into it. Pros. You know, the things that make you go, yeah, this is a good idea. This is something I should do. I really want to do this, and this is something I need in my life. Starting with number 1, the project's done. Meaning, if you're doing multiple piercings, let's say you're doing a set of nipples or a set of earlobes or, a big constellation project, it's usually going to be over and done with in one sitting, opposed to multiple sittings or coming back and getting it done again. So your end product is already there. Number 2, you only have to go through the pain in the process once, opposed to going through it multiple times. Generally, what we do is we set up one for both piercings in one sitting, so you don't have to, stop, do everything else, or come back in a few months and go through the whole waiver or everything else all over again. It's done. You can move on with your life and enjoy other things like getting other piercings. Number 3, you only have to go through that healing process one time opposed to multiple times. I will get a little bit into the gist of healing and how it does sometimes take a little bit longer, but for the most part, you're only going through it one time. You're not, getting a piercing done, taking 6 months to a year to heal it out, and stopping, the healing stopping, and then going on to another one. So it kind of just gets everything done at once. Number 4, discounts. Usually, in most cases, piercers do have a built-in kind of discount system inside their pricing when it comes to doing multiple piercings in one area. If you're getting things that are like not related, like I want an industrial piercing in my navel, there you're probably not going to see the discount as much as you would if you say, come in and go, I want both my nipples done, or I want both my nostrils done, or I want, both my lobes done. Common piercings that people usually do in groups, like lobes, nipples, Dioids would be another example, male genital piercing, labia, minoras, and majoras, those type of ones. Those you're probably going to get some kind of discount because they've already built it into the process because they're usually done in sets. And the last one, number 5, easier to match. In a lot of cases, the body changes a little bit during the healing process. The area can increase slightly in size or move or shift a little bit. So a lot of times it's a lot easier to sit down, mark them out so they perfectly match your anatomy the first time than it is to kind of come back and then try to match up with that old piercing. So it does make it a little bit easier to match those out, though nobody's perfectly exactly the same on both sides, because if you were, you'd look creepy. Before we move on to the cons, if you like this, go ahead and just put all that effort into clicking on that like button, letting us know that you liked it, because we like it when you like it. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, hit that notification bell so that you're notified every single time we post something. Also, if you have any questions or you'd like to add to the conversation, or maybe you have an example or experience with this, please comment. It helps the channel out, and I generally try to answer them when I have time. So let's move on to the cons, the disadvantages, the things that make you go, no, not today. I ain't going to do that. I'm going to move on and do something else. Starting with number 1, the pain increases. Because of how your body handles pain and how those pain receptors and how they register tends to increase with each additional piercing. It's kind of like the first time you do the first piercing, your body's like, hey, you probably shouldn't be doing this. This could be dangerous. The second time you do kind of the same thing, your body goes, hey, you need to stop doing this. This could be very, very dangerous. Third time, you need to stop now. So your body kind of increases. Now, there is always a point where if you are inflicted enough pain where the endorphins kick in, you get a little bit of a shot of adrenaline, and you'll get kind of a euphoric state. This is really common and perceived idea. I think you would have it more in a tattoo, because it usually takes a little bit longer for your body to kind of go, okay, this isn't killing us, and I can't constantly be registering at this level. So it tries to kind of help you out, because for obvious reasons, for some reason, you've decided you need to go through this, and this is important. It usually creates kind of a euphoric state. A lot of runners refer to it as hitting the wall. There's other types of activities that people do to get this, but that is a possibility. However, usually because of the quickness of a piercing, usually those endorphins don't really kick in quick enough to make any difference. So you slowly get an increase in the amount of discomfort you are feeling the more piercings you do in one sitting. Number 2, it can slow down your healing. Your body just has a set amount of resources to heal things. So if you have, let's say, 1 piercing healing, it's going to be able to devote all of that energy to that 1 piercing. Now, if you have 2 piercings, it's going to have to split those resources to 2 piercings. If you have 3, it has to divide it up 3 ways and do it. If you have 4 or 5, it just keeps reducing the amount of resources and energy it can put forward towards healing. So it can cause longer healing times in some cases. Not always. And I have found over the years that it's usually if the piercings are in a more concentrated area. This is more so the case than, let's say, like nipple piercings where one's on one side of your body and one's on the other, or even the bites or double nostrils or nostrils on each side, or lobes, of course. However, if you have multiple piercings in one area, it does seem to tend to take a lot longer, because there's just that train, that supply that goes into that area from your through your blood. There's just so much that can go down that path. So keep that in mind. You might see a longer healing period because you've done your healing multiple piercings. And that goes for, like, you're getting one here, all over the place. Kind of the same thing happens. Number 3, for the same reason that I just talked about, you're going to have higher risk of infection, meaning that because there is a reduction in the amount of resources available, and it's going to take longer for your body to heal, and you're going to have you're more acceptable to infection for that reason. So being extra cautious is usually a good idea, but you need to understand that before getting a number of piercings. It might just be slight, but it does make a difference. Number 4, the more piercings you have, the harder it is to isolate it. Now, when we're talking about isolating, we're isolating for mainly two main reasons. First off, to eliminate or reduce the amount of trauma to that healing tissue. This comes into play a lot with ear piercings and sleeping, or even nostril piercings or eyebrows or anything on the body that tends to be in contact with stuff on a regular basis. Another example would be the navel piercing. Wearing clothing against it will cause issues. The other reason why we want to isolate the piercing is to eliminate places where it comes in contact with contaminants that could lead to infection. So the more piercings, the more open wounds you have, the wider that range is, the more you have to look out for, and the harder it is to isolate those piercings during the healing process. And number 5, the last one, migration. Now, sometimes the body kind of pushes things to where it wants it to be. No matter how well it's marked, no matter how well the piercing is done, no matter how well you take care of it, it might shift or move that piercing a little bit during the healing process. When you're doing multiple piercings, especially things that are supposed to line up or be perfectly symmetrical or appear to be so, a lot of times by the time you've gone through the whole healing process, they will migrate a little bit out of check. So that's always something you want to consider, especially when doing very detailed ear piercings and so forth, where it just needs to have that straight look, where it can't be all over the place. Before we move into what you should consider beforehand or some of the things you should consider, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. There's lots of different t-shirts, designs, etc. There's also one of those merch bars down below where you can purchase things relating to the channel and relating to body art, and including piercing and tattooing. Now, let's move on to things you should consider. First off, get to know your piercer. Should be a professional, should be passionate about what they do, very informative, give out information, do consultations that include risk, aftercare, what kind of regiment you're going to need to do, what kind of commitment it's going to take, and give you and be basically committed to giving you enough information before doing the piercing to let you know what it's going to entail so that you can make an educated decision on whether or not it's right for you. The second one is they should have a working knowledge of anatomy, skilled enough to look at something and know exactly where the piercing is going to work best and look best. They should evaluate during the consultation your anatomy and see if it's even compatible with what you want to do. With these, depending on the piercing, they should ask for your input on placement and etc. And they should be open to this being a collaborative effort. And this is especially true with groupings that are supposed to be symmetrical or supposed to kind of create a pattern, like Constellation Piercings, ladders, bites, etc. It's in even lobes. If they don't look like they match to you, they're going to drive you nuts for the rest of your life. They should be open to having you give your input on where this piercing should go. Next thing is, does your piercer provide aftercare instructions verbally and in writing? I usually, prior to the pandemic, I would make people sit there and listen to me talk for about 15 minutes every time I did a piercing. Because of the pandemic, we had to cut back on the amount of exposure I had with my clientele, and I created videos. So now I give a much shorter version of the aftercare, kind of cover just the basics, and then there is a video. So they should have that information available readily for you, either in video format, definitely in writing, and they should take the time to answer any questions you may have of the process of healing out the piercings. The next thing is do they supply aftercare products, mainly saline? If they don't, where can you get it? Can you buy it beforehand? It's usually best to have this stuff kind of lined up and ready. Of course, it's always more convenient to actually purchase directly from your piercer. Most of us do sell like Nelmed's piercing aftercare saline spray or something equivalent. The next thing you need to consider is how will these piercings affect your daily life? Meaning, how's it going to affect sleeping, clothing, listening to things on your with your earpods or earbuds? Does it affect any type of exercising or activities that you're involved with, motorcycling, what have you? You need to consider those things beforehand and ask questions about them, not after, but before. Next thing is your piercer should give you a complete price before starting the project. They should sit down and go, this is how much it's going to cost. There shouldn't be any surprises later on down the road. Nobody likes bait and switch. They should tell you flat out how much it's going to cost for everything, not just one of them or two of them. Everything they're doing that day. Now let's move on to the piercing experience itself. I'm not going to go as detailed as I do with like when we do individual piercings, but basic any piercing. Consultation, jewelry selection. They're going to ask you about any metal sensitivities you have, any problems you've had with stuff in the past. They're going to pick out the best jewelry that's going to work with that piercing. They're going to have you fill out a waiver, which is generally kind of a questionnaire. It's going to ask about any health issues you have, any medication you're on, controlled or uncontrolled substance, and any type of allergic reactions you might have to any products. And those products should be listed on that waiver. Next up, they set up. They scrub up, set up, get all the equipment out they need to do. And usually with this, we're doing multiple piercings. The whole thing is set up at once. Sometimes it depends on the piercing. If it's one that I think is going to take a little bit longer maybe to get the jewelry in, I'll leave that package, put on a fresh pair of gloves or even scrub, and then set up the second one. It varies, but most cases, if I'm doing like multiple ear piercings, I'll set up for all of them at once. Next up, disinfect the area. Clean it off with some surgical scrub of some sort. Mark the piercing. Now, when you're looking at marks, especially on the face, I don't always have people look at nipple piercings or navels, basically, because there's just pretty much one place it can go, unless they are asking for things that are at angles or vertical or something like that. Other piercings, I usually have them take a look and okay it. When you're looking at piercings, you should do a couple things. First off, look at it up close. Then look at it at arm's length. Understand that most people see you from this length. They do not see you this close unless they're drunk, schizophrenic, or very intimate with you. Also, especially with symmetrical piercings on the nose or on the mouth, it's a good idea to adjust the angle that you're looking at it. Look at them from, look above, look down, look straight. So you have kind of a clue of how even those things match. Once we're all decided on the piercing markings and you're happy with them, then we go through the piercing procedure. It varies from each one. All are done a little different. Sometimes clamps are used, sometimes they're not. Sometimes the receiving tubes are used, sometimes they're not. Sometimes you need insertion pins and et cetera, and guide pins and tapers are used. Sometimes they're not. Once the piercing's done, you might see a little bit of bleeding. Usually slight, lasts only a few minutes, if much. There'll probably be a little bit of throbbing and aching immediately after the piercing is done. That usually fades. Depending on the piercing, usually a minute or two, and then it'll just be tender to the touch. If you bump it, you're definitely going to know it. And that's part of your body telling you, don't mess with it. Leave it alone. Isolate me. It's hurt. Leave me alone. It's also uncommon to see redness, discolorization, heat, tenderness to touch, inflammation, anywhere from about 3 days to 7 days, depending on the piercing. Now let's talk a little bit about healing. Clean the piercing twice daily using sterile saline solution. Practice cross-contamination prevention, which should involve cleaning your hands before handling it, no oral contact or exchange of bodily fluids on or around the piercing, no swimming. Keep pets away from it. Do not let them sleep in the bed with you. Keep bedding, clothing, anything else that comes in contact with it cleaned on a regular basis. There's probably additional things depending on the placement of the piercing. You mainly want to avoid contact. Do not play with the piercing. Do not rotate it. Do not move it. Of course, and I brought this up before, do not sleep on the piercing. Sleep on the other side of the back. This is why sometimes there's an advantage to doing one at a time, standing from the standpoint of you heal out one side, and you can sleep on the other side, then you heal that side out, and then you switch and do the other side, and you can sleep on the other side. That is one of the main advantages of not doing both at once, if they're on both sides of the body, like earlobes, for example. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about jewelry. I usually go into like a little bit more detail of what I would consider acceptable jewelry for a piercing. But since we're talking about a lot of different places and a lot of different things, we're just going to say this. Jewelry should be left in at all times. Only removed to be replaced. Even if the piercing is 10, 15 years old, if you like it, leave something in it. If it is pierced with post-style jewelry or even a curved barbell and the jewelry is really long, you should downsize as soon as it's done healing, or if it is creating a situation where you're getting a lot of movement, it's getting caught in a lot of things, then it should be downsized as soon as possible once that swelling goes down, and you should see your piercer to have it done the first time. Avoid jewelry that has sharp edges, points, things dangling off of it. All that stuff tends to just constantly get caught on things, especially in areas of the body that are in contact with clothing on a regular basis or intimate parts of your partner. Now let's talk about living with multiple piercings. A lot of people have probably had experience with this. Once again, leave the jewelry in at all times. Understand that these piercings can close even after they heal. It's a good idea to leave something in it. Sleeping on those multiple piercings, especially ear piercings where you have like 10 or 15 in your ear, may never be comfortable. It's just a fact of life. Especially with cartilage piercings, any slight abuse, even in a well-healed piercing, can cause trauma to it, and it'll be sore and tender the next day and suddenly flare up and act weird. It's best to try to avoid any trauma regardless of how long you've had the piercing. Trauma's, it's still metal, and it's still in soft tissue. Which do you think is going to break first? Check jewelry for tightness. If it's threaded jewelry, make sure you check it on a regular basis. Threadless jewelry, just basically giving it a squeeze on each side occasionally will kind of make sure it's in there. But otherwise, check those balls and ends. Now let's talk about abandoning even multi-piercings. This is pretty much a standard for any piercing. If the piercing is in the healing process and there's no signs of infection, it's not a problem to remove it. It's probably going to close pretty rapidly. Just keep an eye on it, just like you would any other cut or that you may have on your body. If there's any signs of infection or problems, seek medical attention. If there is a problem with the piercing, especially if there's any signs of infection, you should see a professional, either a piercer or somebody in the medical profession before removing the jewelry. And the reason for that is, if it is in fact infected, is how your body heals infections. It does so by pushing infected tissue and fluids out through the wound while replacing it with healthy tissue below. When you remove the jewelry, which is pretty much going to make that hole close, it blocks the path, and that can develop into a cyst or an abscess, and then your body very slowly and often painfully pushes it out of the body if it can. And it may require you having it lanced and drained by a medical professional. Now, if the piercing's healed and there's no signs of problems or what have you, removing the jewelry will just cause that piercing to slowly close, usually closing in the center and then slowly filling outward. There are some piercings that just never close. They're rare, and it varies from person to person. The only other thing you may notice is occasionally on something like that is you might see this white cream cheese substance, has a very nasty odor to it, kind of a waxy oil kind of stuff. That's sebum. What it is, it's a natural product. Your body tends to produce it more so in scar tissue or on scar tissue. It collects to that piercing hole because you're not scrubbing inside there every day. And then when you squeeze it, it comes out. It isn't a sign that you have an infection or any other problem. It's not something you need to worry about. Just clean the area. That's it. Well, that's all I have to say on this subject today. Here's hoping all your piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I hope to see you for your body piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Take care. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video. Probably this one, or that one, or maybe that one, or that one.